Okay, well, hello and welcome to November 2018's Liminal Light Herbal forecast that accompanies Suzanne Stone's herbal forecast for my forecast. And we have today with us Suzanne Stone herself.
Hi.
And Bonnie Kavanaugh.
Hello.
I just realized I'd never said your last name before.
Now they know.
Yeah.
Secret no longer.
Yeah. Well, this month has a special feature in it, which is Jupiter returning to rulership in Sagittarius. So, of course, some things happen before that, but we haven't even gotten around to recording during that period. So tomorrow, Jupiter goes into Sagittarius tomorrow as far as when we're recording. And so we might as well jump right ahead to November 8th. And just getting ready to incorporate Jupiter herbs into our life in a big way.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there's many Jupiter herbs to choose from, but some top choices I think are nutmeg, lemon balm, dandelion, and hyssop, of course. So nutmeg, myristica fragrans, is, of course, an amazing spice with a sordid history. Hildegard says if a person eats nutmeg, it will open up his heart, make his judgment free from obstruction, and give him a good disposition.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She recommends eating her cookies of joy every day. And
do you have a full recipe for the cookies of joy?
Yeah, nutmeg, cinnamon. I've made them before. They're pretty
Yeah.
good. I brought them to this gathering and people could not stop eating
Oh,
them.
wow.
Like,
Yeah.
by the time my talk was done, they were all gone.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So does she go into detail about like flour and other baking measurements?
Spelt is definitely her top flour.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Yeah.
She's super spelt. I mean, she has spelt diets where you're just like fasting with spelt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, spelt drinks, spelt soup, spelt like bread. You're just
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Jupiter isn't about fasting as much as feasting,
No.
but it is interesting that when I went over all the notes you sent me and then was looking into those herbs, so many of the things that came up had like a digestive help aspect to them. Yeah, quality. So it's, so they're a lot of the herbs seem to be helping the merry monk in his feasting.
Yeah. I mean, Jupiter does rule the liver, and so supporting the digestive system in that zone is also pretty important. Yeah, with the feasting, I mean, you're eating a lot of great stuff.
Right.
When you put those bitters in there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Bonnie and I have like a drinking with the monks, like Catholic, like historical and traditional, like and modern calendar. Like, that we keep. Helps us keep track of what feast day is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can look at this like an oil painting of like in the style of the masters, and watch the monks drink while you feast for every single saint.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Later, herb, when we talk about ground elder, which is also called bishop's weed,
right?
They talk about maybe partly it's called that because the bishops were drinking so much that they needed they were getting gout.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that made me think of it. I was like, yeah, this is totally the merry monks, like the feasting friar, like get ready, because that happens when people have Jupiter transits. Like Jupiter in the first house is notorious for like, oh, great year, you had a lot of opportunities, really good luck, like you became bigger as a person, like a bigger heart, like you expanded in your business, but you also gained 20 pounds,
Right,
also in your waistline.
Yeah, in your waistline. And I grew like a huge beard that year, like which definitely ends up being a thing. I was in a class with Austin Kopic and he brought that up, like I was sitting there like with my headphones on taking this class and he's like, yeah, and blah, 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 maybe you'll grow a giant beard. And I was like, oh my God, I totally just grew a giant beard. Because he was like, just Google like Jupiter and Zeus and every association of Jupiter, every picture, every like anthropomorphic picture, there's a giant beard.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's pretty exciting. Jupiter going into Sagittarius in rulership. I think that I'm so thankful that Jupiter goes into Scorpio first because it feels crucial to like go into that initiative underworld before you go into this expansion. So maybe you kind of bring some of that underworld wisdom with you before you're like hot in the hot air balloon, like
Yeah.
soaring. And be like, oh yeah, remember?
Right.
Remember Icarus? Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Take heed. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of that has to do with like Scorpio is like filtering and transmutation of materials. You know, that you're like everything that you can filter out everything that's bad, but some of it you're like, oh, this isn't going to go through the filter, so we have to like actually change it. We have to like bust out like some artillery and do something about it. You know,
some people could feel lighter too from that transformation, like that heaviness transforming into something else.
Yeah, and I've noticed with clients, some of them are like, you know, they have like a bunch of planets in Scorpio, and all of their, you know, all these their Sun and their Venus and etc. Like the Mercury or whatever got transited by Jupiter this past year, and like in the 10th house or in the first house, and it should be great. You know, you're like, those are all transits that you're like, oh great, Jupiter came to your Venus, Jupiter came to your Sun, but they had really hard years because they like all the stuff got pulled out of like the basement, and they had to sort through it. You know, and they were like, oh, I literally thought I'd never see that again. I'd never have to deal with that again. And so, like you're saying, like that's when you're like, oh, all that darkness got turned to something that like I can fuel my car with, you know, like, and get in that like Sagittarian chariot and take off, you know.
The coal turning into the diamond fuel for your
totally, yeah. When we're
shoes,
beyond, it's not electric cars, it's just diamond cars. There's just one diamond, and it always works. So. Do we want to just like kind of go wild and talk about nutmeg to begin with? Because that was the one that like really stirred me and disturbed me and amazed me. Because we started getting into it before we started recording. Like nutmeg is typically used in lots of Jupitarian magic and associated with Jupiter in medicine and you know it's used a lot in like gambling magic, like in hoodoo and conjure. It's always going to be used as a dust for dice, or used in a hand or a mojo bag, and it for bringing money. But I noticed like most often it seemed to be gambling related rather than just like your business doing well. It was kind of just like that kind of crazy luck. And looking more into nutmeg, you're like, whoa, it actually has this kind of scandalous history. And so it kind of made me think of more that like devilish side of luck.
It's also this hidden seed, you know.
Yeah.
And this,
the way it grows.
Yeah. So it's almost like
double hidden.
Secret. Double hidden under the mace. And so that feels really telling. That would be really for gambling. Like it's this hidden secret you have.
Yeah. It almost grows as a kind of charm, you know, it's like set up. Do you want to kind of describe that for people that don't know how mace and nutmeg interact?
So nutmeg is part of the magnolia family, so it's this kind of waxy evergreen tropical tree with these beautiful white flowers. I've never seen it in real life, but yeah, and then so the seed is kind of like, people describe it as a bit like a lemon, like this kind of yellowish outside, and then I think you harvest it before it's really completely ripe, and then the mace forms this beautiful like ropey red, almost like lava or something flowing around the nutmeg seed, and it's called an aril in botany, and it's basically a vessel that holds the seed. If anyone has seen a yew tree and seen the yew berries, people call them berries. They're really arils, A-R-I-L. And it holds a seed, but it doesn't completely conceal it. So you can see the yew seed kind of sticking out. But the like mace does the same thing. Yeah. Almost looks like fishnet stockings.
Definitely,
And so the mace is harvested and used as a spice, as well as the nutmeg, of course, the seed.
Yeah, it's interesting that... Oh, go ahead.
Well, How is it? I'm just out of curiosity. How is the what is the texture of the mace like? Like, does it have to dry and then it's
Well,
like kind of like hard and
I
barky?
think it's
or?
kind of what did they say that it
Well,
was?
we have dried mace.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of
you're talking
wet.
about like skirt.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about that
skirling.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that, like
What is it?
the spirit of the Grimorium Verum that is the intermediary. That's kind of like the what's the word? Not like when you pick up the phone and you're
The
like,
secretary.
no, the operator.
Operator.
Yeah, like when you pick up the phone, you're like, operator, give me Lucifer.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah.
So it's the first spirit you interact with, and whenever
door.
you do any of these operations, is the doorman. Yeah, and so it's like that, like a legua kind of like head. You know, like you even like there's like in the Grimorium Verum, there's the like, oh yeah, make this head, you know, or it says like get the head of a criminal or get the head of a cat, like it's like the version from like Cyprianic traditions, but really it's like, oh yeah, you could probably just make this magical head. It describes an operation to bring a head, but it doesn't say to use skirlin, and so that's more like a reconstruction, you know. That's what they're probably mean to do, but skirlin's role is like whenever you make the pact, you make the skirlin character first, and then you write his evocation, and then underneath that you put the seals of the other spirits.
And you must burn like mace, like
for him,
skirlin. Yeah, and yes, of course.
So
I don't know what the disconnect was, because I just think of mace as like what you spray at.
Right.
Yeah. Theoretically,
Not the same mace.
But yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Or but like absolutely can picture them. They're orange and like just like strange flowers that must be like somehow like whipped
It's a strange
off.
ropey kind of.
Have you used?
I've just seen it.
Yeah.
And you know it's like surrounding. It looks like
but that
what we have looks just like this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
But
because it dries, it loses its color when it dries.
Yeah,
it's red
we're
color.
kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but you talk about it with like Jupiter and the nutmeg, and then mace and Mercury, and I've never heard of mace and Mercury before. I've always seen mace and but I never like specifically was like mace. What are the correspondences? But I'd seen it correspond to Jupiter before, and but it is interesting because of the skirlin connection. Like that role of skirlin in the Verum is very like is absolutely a mercurial role, you know. And I always thought it was interesting that it was like this guy is absolutely acting like Mercury, but he wants a Jupiter herb. He's
got everybody's number. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and almost like that mace outside is like the outside communicator. Between the realms.
The intermediary.
Yeah. So I mean, because of later on in the month, the Mercury and Jupiter interacting and Sagittarius together, these two just make such a great combination this month.
Yes, a definite mace nutmeg month, and it's like Thanksgiving is going to happen too, or month, but year. Yeah. Okay, so before we leave nutmeg, we should go back and talk about, like it was where Europeans were getting nutmeg, just because we mostly talk about like European-based herbalism, not because we're like, well, back to the Europeans, but they were mostly getting nutmeg, it seemed, from like, because what did you say was like, who was the king that had like his coronation pathway?
It was Henry VI.
Henry VI had, what happened?
He had the pathway to his coronation cleansed with nutmeg.
In what year?
Amazing.
1196?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it was around there.
That's wise for your coronation, for your rulership.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about like,
so people might want to do that.
Right,
totally.
You might want to just kind of cleanse your...
Yeah, if you're getting coronated.
I wonder about using it just as a house cleanse anyway, though.
Yeah, totally. For sure. Yeah, we should definitely be using a lot of Jupiter herbs all year, but nutmeg for sure, the pathway between your bed to your kitchen to your car, just like dust it with nutmeg.
It definitely is this next, or, it's like, it's 13 months, right? That
Yeah.
so this is get used to it and
Yeah.
make room for it.
But like you said, it's an era because it's, Jupiter comes back to a sign every 12 around every 12 years because it's in a sign for 13 months, so it migrates. But so anyway, so I was thinking what Bonnie was saying, it's like 1100 something, and at that point Europeans were probably getting mace and nutmeg from the Arabs were trading down to the islands where they were coming from was like the Bandanese, and so it's probably coming from the spice road, at first, trading up through Europe, and then eventually the Portuguese got hip to it, and then they were the ones who had the hands on the spice trade coming from Indonesia and Malaysia and those islands, and then eventually, finally, it really got chaotic and violent and insane when the Dutch East India Company and then later the British got involved. And so that was one of the things I thought was really interesting as like a Jupiterian herb that is, used in abundance magic a lot, and it's just like bring me luck and etc. That at one point, I think I read the statistic that when the Dutch were trying to take over the island, that they reduced the population on one of these the main island there is the biggest island I think of the chain, but they're all pretty small islands. I read that they were literally all within gunshot of each other. That maybe not at that point you could shoot from island to island, but you would hear it. And that they reduced the population from 15,000 to 1,000, and the island was on fire, and it was just tons of burning nutmeg. And I was thinking about the censer with nutmeg burning, and you're doing this just this luck magic, and it's like the Greater Benefic. It's like benevolent Jupiter, but it has this really kind of like crazy twisted history, which so it just like made me think a lot more about we don't often see the connection within planetary associations of Zeus and Jupiter. Like you're but like an astrological text will say from the Hellenistic era, the original Greek will say for as far as when Jupiter's aspecting Mars, it'll say literally when Zeus looks at Aries, so they were thinking of it as Zeus and Jupiter have that syncretism, but Zeus is a lot more violent and a lot more poorly behaved than what we get out of Jupiter as far as astrological effects. So, but I just was thinking about this one instance, or you look at nutmeg's certainly Jupiterian, and then you're like, oh wow, some crazy stuff happened there,
Yeah, and that it was traded to the British, or British traded New Amsterdam for the Rune Island, or one of the islands.
Yeah, right there.
The Banda Islands.
Yeah, it's the Rune Island. The village leader of Rune of that island accepted King James I of England as their sovereign, and then they kind of snuck in there, and there was the Dutch in exchange for the island of Manhattan in the city of New Amsterdam, which became New York. They were the British kind of snuck their way into the Bandanese, the Banda Islands, but then the British were like, well, don't worry about it. You can have New York City. So yeah, New York City was originally traded for nutmeg, and then it has connections later with Connecticut. When nutmeg was
Isn't Connecticut called the nutmeg state?
Yeah,
because they were because sly Yankees were selling fake nutmeg.
Wow.
Nutmeg, woods carved to look like nutmegs to unsuspecting clients.
Did you say what wood they used, or was it just random?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, now what I read. This is traders would whittle nutmeg out of wood, creating a wooden nutmeg.
Yeah.
a term which later came to mean any type of fraud. So just like,
Yeah.
you're like,
Are you trying to pull a wooden nutmeg?
yeah, like,
Yeah.
you're like, oh damn, I bought a wooden nutmeg,
Yeah.
you know?
We've all bought wooden nutmegs.
And so people were calling Connecticut the nutmegger state.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because a friend of ours from Connecticut just told us what about nutmeg?
He said that nutmeg, he's a chef, and he said that nutmeg is the most used spice in processed foods. Like you can, and it. He said that because it has sort of a druggy effect.
It's a narcotic.
Yeah, and then also that, but also that if you, a higher chef told him that if you can put nutmeg into something without it being traceable, then you have like achieved a new echelon of chefdom.
Well, it's so funny because he's from Connecticut and it's continuing on that kind of like nutmegger, like.
I know, I'm totally gonna, talk to him about it tomorrow.
And then going back to like gambling, then you can kind of see the value of it. If it's like, oh yeah, you can trade New York for this thing, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Like you played a good hand, you know?
Yeah.
I read that like old time, and with, you know, the mace, as we were saying, that maybe mercurial, like, and Jupitarian. I read an old time gambler's charm was to drill a hole in a nutmeg and fill the insides with quicksilver. And so, you know, it's like liquid mercury, and then cover it with tree gum or candle wax. Mm-hmm. And then that was like what you'd carry with you to like visit like the gambling table. I think that's like a Mississippi River, like riverboat gambling charm.
When did you come up with that idea? That's genius.
I know, it's genius, right?
Yeah,
but then you're adding mercury to the nutmeg.
Yeah.
Where you take the mace off, then you add the mercury back in. And I heard later that there's all these, with those mercury dimes, people would do elaborate stuff with like shaving a mercury dime like halfway so you have half a dime and half dust, and then you could fill the nutmeg with that, or you can different things that you do after they were like, oh, you shouldn't use liquid mercury, or it's just harder to get. Like the only reason,
For a while, it was just like medicine. I mean, that's what most people were like, well, did they die from the disease or too much mercury?
Yeah. And they still use it in Mexico and in India, and I know at least in India, I've talked to Ayurvedic doctors there who are like, oh yeah, it's just all about the way you prepare it.
Of course, everything. Yeah.
So it's crazy you can use something that volatile, but really mercury by nature is supposed to be neutral. But like, you know, if something's going to pass through your body like that, then what like DMSO, right? Like you can mix DMSO with something and take it as medicine because it absorbs through your skin. But if you smear DMSO on this table, and then whatever other bacteria is on this table would go right into our skin, right, you know?
Yeah. Right.
But,
amazing.
Yeah, so one thing, and this is going to come back up, is that I also noticed someone said that like the whole, what you reminded me of it earlier when you were talking about it looks like lava, the mace, and that like nutmeg isn't a drift seed, like, you know, other stuff from down there like coconut, like needs to cure in the salt water to continue on and seed elsewhere, but nutmeg doesn't. That would like just destroy it, and so it can't float from island to island. And it's not birds that are picking up; it's too big. It's not like, it's usually birds like ingest something and shit it out elsewhere, and it's like kind of it's almost like a fertilized, already happening seed, you know. And they also need male and female trees, you know, like fruit trees.
Pear tree,
like a pear tree. And so the males can like can fertilize a lot of female trees, but so it's really it's even like confusing. It's hard for them to like figure out how it got even from island to island on the few islands it exists on. It's only in those Bandas Islands, and now it's like I think they've planted it, so it's in the Caribbean as well. But that someone was saying that like that proximity to like flowing lava and the like crazy conditions that it like can only exist in, and that it's isolated to the Bandas Islands, have made for that, as well as other spices from down there, have the intensity of alkaloids that make it such a spice.
Right.
You know, that
Yeah.
that Peter Piper was known for, right? Because when he says Peter Piper picks a, what is it? Picks a peck of peppers.
Pickled peppers.
Pickled
Yeah.
peppers. Yeah, that is that pepper at that time meant any of these spices. Like it was also referring to nutmeg. But yeah, so like it even looks like it has lava surrounding it. So it's like kind of a primordial.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's almost, it feels really, it feels almost like the earth center to me. Like the mace surrounding that, and then the core.
Oh yeah, so that, I guess what I was thinking about with that is that it's, so they all those spices grow very near the Tropic of Cancer, which is just funny how it ended up with the name, and then it's Cancer is Jupiter's exaltation as well, you know. And that like all the people that were going down there to get these spices, it was like, even though when we look at the European kind of colonial like genocide horror side of it, it's horrible, but there is this like kind of adventure holy grail side of it too,
Right.
you know, that they were like they called like Peter Piper the Robin Hood of botany or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Because he was a pirate as well.
Do you want to talk about lemon balm, or do you want to talk about Venus going direct? Or
Yeah. No,
where should we go now? Do you want
I
to keep
think we
talking
should-
about nutmeg? I mean,
no. I think we should go back to the rest of the Jupiter herbs because I think they're the centerpiece, and then
Yeah.
we'll run down.
well,
but-
also, it's interesting because you were talking about them being helpful in digestion, and so this month we have Thanksgiving, which is, of course, and all the events around it, which just it's a lot of food and a lot of time with families, and it's harder for some to be with their families and to be around that kind of, you know, all this feasting, and so it's interesting to have these herbal allies to get you through all of that, because I think lemon balm would be perfect. I mean, lemon
It's
balm is
perfect
just
for that.
amazing.
Yeah. Having a bottle of lemon balm with you, like a bunch of tea whenever you go around the family, and just
yeah, if you can get your
like
your aunts and
put in
uncles.
everyone's drink
Right,
secretly.
yeah.
And then, I mean, you talk
Toast
about
them.
straw later, but even just, I mean,
Yeah.
our friend just gave Chris a giant tincture bottle filled with milky oats tincture, you know,
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
salivating it. Like
Yeah.
this, you know,
Yeah,
so
I mean, I did mention
beautiful.
a little later, but I'm always like, oh, I couldn't mention oats
I
every month
know.
because basically
Well,
everyone
it's
needs
just perfect,
oats
and it just
constantly.
goes. It's like perfect for everybody's constitution. I don't
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, we'll just have to be like the liminal light, like Moon of Hyldemoer forecast, sponsored by Milky Oats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, please sponsor us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lemon balm, of course, is very Jupitarian to me because it's a really uplifted of spirit kind of plant. It's like you take lemon balm and you're just, people take it for feeling sad during the winter time. It grows all over. When I lived in Portland, Oregon, it grew everywhere because it rained there all winter long, and it would be like, hello, just have some of me.
Yeah.
Everyone feels so sad
Yep.
that you're not seeing the sun right now. So yeah, it's an amazing ally in that way. Oh, of course, also it's one of our only sour mints. So it's also cooling. So if any kind of too much heat in one's body would be
And that
good.
wood stove.
Yeah, the wood stove and the brandy and like the
Yeah.
roasty meat. You know?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, culpepper also points to it's a Jupitarian herb, but it's Jupiter in Cancer. So it's so like we're seeing the Tropic of Cancer, like Jupiter's exaltation, and it's
That makes sense.
and it's lunar too. So it's that food
Yes,
and comfort
it is lunar.
version of Jupiter, not like necessarily the like just the Sagittarius like riding a horse towards your ideals or you know like
Yeah, it's almost like this beautiful home with the fire going,
Yeah,
beautiful
yeah.
food, and like someone who you're gonna have a great conversation with for the evening. And
yeah, because Jupiter exalts in Cancer because it's like abundant resources.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah,
And then other people say that to eat it eat it after the evening meal, like you're saying, to have, but to also like to have pleasant dreams, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not like you're Bill Cosby eating like the meatball hoagie or like whatever, and then seeing the devil or Dracula or whatever. You're like take your full belly upstairs to your bed and just like have an amazing dream session, you know, like
Totally.
that's very lunar too, because it spans the feasting and the dreaming, you know.
It also cools a fever if anyone's having, or it's really good to take if you're starting to feel sick.
Yeah, I've never taken it for that reason, but that's a really good idea.
One of the best antivirals
Yeah, and
that we have.
it makes sense because Discordes says it's a remedy against scorpion stings and the bites of mad dogs, you know, which I thought was really interesting because you get like Cancer, you know, trining Scorpio and like that whole relationship. Like it's like, oh, well, it's harmonized with scorpions across the ecliptic. And then like it has the dog star, like is like the rising of Cancer, you know, is like used to be Sothis or Sirius rising to when the Nile would flood, you know, and like seeing this like mad dogs and scorpion stings side of Cancer it was interesting, but that could all like be packed into your little nice lemon balm. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hear some dandelion.
Dandelion, seems exceedingly Jupiterian to me. Just that deep, long taproot that's just able to gather. I mean, it's almost like, I wonder if it would be almost like, not quite. It's not quite, but because of the taproot, it could be Jupiter and Scorpio being able to tap into that underworld and then bringing it up. And the ability to transform, like Jupiter's just been doing in Scorpio for the past 13 months.
Is it like nettles and how it can kind of cleanse soil, cleanse like earth? You know how
in a way,
pull,
a lot of those taproots do.
Yeah,
and brings up also minerals from the soil. So it's great in one's garden, even though other people don't think so.
I love it.
They're wrong.
They're wrong. Yeah, that's official.
They're wrong. Dandelion everywhere. So it's amazing liver and gallbladder support. So once again, our digestive system support. And that's also ruled by Jupiter as well, the liver. Incredible also as well going into our bodies, taking over a long period of time. Like if someone's going to be taking internally dandelion, then I would recommend like a year or a year and a half, just like really work with dandelion.
Oh, interesting.
Because that deep, long it's slow medicine. It's like that deep taproot is slow, like that medicine slowly going down and gathering everything inside that's not serving and bringing out and transforming it.
Well, it's interesting because it's like one of the first things that pops up in the spring. That's like when you really know. And so after that long winter of just kind of being in that like inert or underworld state, then it's just like, boom, I brought like a bunch of big yellow, like amazing flowers for you in like a big way. Like,
right.
Like I know everyone notices it everywhere, even if live through a city, like in a city, like it comes through, like you said, it comes through the cracks in the pavement. And so that's like Jupiter in Pisces, that like not able, like he's like barriers, whatever. I don't even see them. You know, I go right through them. And like that permeation, but also like here, like in where we just have all fields, they just go crazy. It's like that expansive abundance. It's like, it's not just like, oh, this is in flower. It's like, whoa, there's no grass. It's just yellow from one end of the field to the other.
But then when it goes to seed, and it's just like their seeds are blasting through.
Yeah, and that's really expansive.
Air.
Expanding everywhere.
And your neighbors hate you for not, trimming your dandelions.
Right, but they should just be eating it and
because the bitterness and the taproot makes me always think about Saturn. But there's so much to, like, the list. It's like ranked choice voting. Or whatever.
Yeah, totally,
You're like, oh, no, this guy's definitely Jupiterian. But I found, like, an interesting pun in Culpeper, which I find he's such a cheeky bastard that
Yeah.
I've been noticing, like, this is like a full scale kind of pun paragraph, like when how you're talking about like for gall, like he mentions
Yeah.
mentions that it cures obstructions of liver, gall, and spleen and diseases that result from them, including hypochondria, right? So it's like it turns like word spleen causes problems with pessimism. That's why it's like Baudelaire would talk about like his main muse was like the spleen, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, he drank absinthe and had this like kind of like nasty spleen that's like the seat where he was speaking from. It was very pessimistic. Where Jupiter promotes optimism, but let me find this Jupiter pun, which he also says that he just goes kind of like crazy on.
Also, the yellow flower, and yellow is telling of liver health. You know, we see
Yeah,
the color yellow.
Yeah.
It's often a liver.
Because he says right at the top, and I don't see this on any of his other entries, it says dandelion, vulgarly called pissabeds.
Yeah. It's also diuretic, so...
Yeah. So you can tell he's already having like fun with it. Like when he gets down, he's like cucumbers, daisies, and he's like dandelions. Like he's kind of like being a bastard about it. But like, okay, he says, "You see here what virtues this common herb hath, and that is the reason the French and the Dutch so often eat them in the spring. And now if you look a little further, like Jupiter, like looking to other places and beyond barriers, you may see plainly without a pair of spectacles that foreign physicians are not so selfish as ours are, but more communicative of the virtues of plants to people." So it's really funny. He's just, I think this whole thing, and you see it's separate section, even it's just this like, he throws this like Jupiter pun into his whole dandelion entry, you know, like, which is just hilarious. I think he's a real cheeky motherfucker.
Yeah, he is.
I mean, I think he kind of got bored, like, making these books. You can tell. There's just, like, anybody who can, anybody with toes can identify this herb, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. He says about lemon balm.
Yeah. I often do find myself laughing out loud when I'm reading culpa.
Yeah, he's hilarious. He's like, with lemon balm, like, he's like everyone knows this, so there's like, it would be like ludicrous for me to try to describe it.
Yeah,
exactly.
But he doesn't call it lemon balm, he just calls it balm. Which is, you know, it's just so funny to have that be the line after just like the generic entry title. Be like, balm.
Yeah.
He's like, you know what I mean. And then you're like,
that's
no,
like
it actually took me a while to figure out.
The balm came from.
Yeah, it's the balm.
Yeah.
It came from Culpepper.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, like it's the motherfucking balm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Culpepper.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nikki, baby.
Another really great thing about dandelion in the spring is putting 1 to 3 of the flowers in a mug and then pouring hot water over it and drinking the tea. It's really Jupitarian to me because it's like a combination of the sweet bitter.
Yeah.
Like I'm always like, I feel like this is what the bees are tasting.
Right, totally,
beautiful and delicious. It's a great way to take it. And then also Judith Hill, who is an astrologer who does a lot of medical astrology, states that Sagittarius coordinates this central nervous system while Gemini rules the system. And dandelion, being rich in calcium, assists the nervous system by supporting the neurotransmitters transmitting messages through the system. So it also fits in that way. And also the bitterness dissolves sluggish energy. You know, Jupiter is not sluggish at all.
Which you could just attribute to bad digestion.
Right, totally. Yeah. Promoting joy, motivation, like, you know, it's a great, I put it in formulas for people who are feeling pretty sad, like sad, or, you know, I think it's a really good slow medicine for that. Yeah. I mean, it just takes a lot of patience, which is sometimes hard when you're sad, but it's really potassium rich as well. It's overall amazing healer, and it's insane that people are killing it with chemicals, like constantly poisoning our earth to try to get rid of one of our top medicines.
Well, that's interesting about that. That's similar to that nature. Be like, oh yeah, here's nutmeg, very Jupiterian, but has this kind of conflict in its history. That like dandelion has some conflict, and Zeus is very like down to fight, you know.
Yeah.
There's like and it reminded me when you say it, like Jupiter's big but not sluggish, right? Like 13 months in a sign is slow, but he's still kind of cooking, you know. Just that you're like every year he's in a new sign, you know.
Yeah,
like
totally.
And that like it can bring you luck and gambling, so that's kind of fast or et cetera, right? Or like that's he loves Cancer because he can fill the larder, but you know he's moving pretty fast. And like Jupiter itself has like it's a huge planet. It's like that gas giant, but its electromagnetic system extends out like something crazy like 3,000 miles from the surface of Jupiter, you know?
Yeah, amazing.
And that like it's and then you think of Zeus like hurling lightning bolts, and lightning bolts are fast, and this like electromagnetic extension, you know. So it's really interesting. Also that like the feasting and the digestion, and it's like gas planet, you know, like. But yeah, it's like this weird, almost paradox between fast and slow. Like in the opposite of his rulerships are Mercury's rulerships, where Mercury's really fast, but he's always turning around and going back the other way, you know? So it's like that spectrum that they're on is really interesting. Like Jupiter kind of does that, but he just usually doesn't leave the same sign. If you watch his cycle, he zooms really fast across a sign, and right now where he's at in pace, like he enters the sign and dashes almost to the other end of the sign, stations for a really long time, like almost doesn't move for weeks, then turns around and starts moving the other way and creeps back to the spot that he's going to station at again. And then as soon as he stations direct again, he like fucking hoofs it back to his you know, to like the other end of his shadow, and then just zooms out of the sign. It's pretty amazing to watch. Like he's like almost seems to be stationary twice or at 2 points in the year, but the rest of the time he's moving pretty quickly, you know, like faster than you'd expect.
Yeah.
Well, you can stand on Mercury, but you can't like stand on Jupiter, and I think that like is like really indicative of their personalities when like feeling an aspect of them and like watching their ways.
Yeah, because luck, you're like, where does it come from?
Yeah.
You know, like it's not like, but usually like when you get something from Mercury, you're like, oh, I like that was a really good sale. This is why. Like there's like a logical.
Or even just thinking about mail. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
it's got this message.
I guess like maybe not like email as much, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
But
like email, where does it come from?
The cloud.
But
yeah.
What is the cloud?
Yeah, it might be complex,
Another
but
episode.
you can like trace it with Mercury. With Jupiter, it's harder to like trace the root. You're just like, oh well, it was just a lucky day, you know.
Yeah.
So speaking of Mercury, do you want to move? We're not moving very quickly here, but I think the main idea is just to kind of bolster like the Jupiter herbs, you know. But we're, you know, as the month gets rolling, Mercury's in there. He's in Sagittarius. That's his detriment, and he's eventually going to go retrograde there. So on the morning of November 9th, we're talking about he's entering the second decan, and then I think that's just his he switches out of the decan he rules, the first decan, into the second decan, where now he's in hot water, even though he's co-present with the ruler, so that really helps him out. But you're talking about lavender.
Yeah, I was researching on many different sources. I found lavender. Of course, all of our herbs are ruled by many different planets, but ruled by Jupiter, Mercury, and the Sun. I found different areas, and that's kind of this. The Sun's going to be coming into the zone, but it felt like that being the bridge between Jupiter and Mercury lavender would be a good for that. Also because it brings such clarity to things, like you're just feeling unclear, spritzing a bunch of lavender in a room, you just feel calm, you feel like focused, you feel some answers coming. It's also cooling and stimulating at the same time. And it's great for grieving, it's for anxiousness, It's another spirit lifter, which is maybe where we're getting some of the Jupiterian aspects from.
I love how the flowers grow. Kind of, the plant can be so bushy, the leaves, and then the flowers just go off in these shoots, and have the flowers atop these shoots. And you can really see that kind of expansive quality.
Yeah, and like you're saying, they go up and shoot up, but like a lot of times in horticulture, will spread out into an area like crazy too.
Right. They kind of, their branches can fall to the ground and then root themselves and then keep going. And then
like
also it can seed
onion.
itself too. Yeah, totally.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was thinking it was really interesting that it's mentioned, in the Orphic Song of the Argonauts as being one of the herbs associated with Hecate, and then, as it being a mercury herb, and Hecate also being a psychopomp like Hermes, and then I looked into the word in Greek is stoichas, like stoichas, and then there's the term stoichae, which is stoicheia. And I only was doing this morning, but I was like, well, that's a really crazy etymological connection. I don't know if that's simply phonetic as or phonemic, as they these are just the English. The Latin letter English pronunciation versions of the words. Like if I could see them both in Greek, you might be like, oh, they're actually not etymologically related. But looking at them like this, you're like, oh yeah, they're almost the same word.
Right.
And that stoichae is the word that Empedocles uses to mean elements. He calls the four underlying principles, the four underlying elements, rhizomata, which is where we get the word rhizomes, which means roots. But Plato calls them stoichae, so they're elements, but they're also used to refer to letters of the alphabet throughout the classical texts, and also just smaller units in general, which make up sentences even. And elements also as smaller units making up bodies. So it's kind of this term that means a lot of different things. And over history, the term has been used to refer to letters, characters, alphabets, foundational principles, fundamentals, physical elements, and also planets, stars, chthonic spirits, elemental spirits, spirits of the stars, spirits of the planets, spirits of the decans. And so it's like this word that, and then you see that later in how they use characteres, which where we get characters, which means the symbol for the spirit or the planet is the spirit or the planet. And it's also how you call it, and it's also how you spell it. And they're all the same thing. And so it kind of displays archetypes without thinking of it in the Jungian psychological term. You're just oh, well, this is just, the archetype just kind of emanates out from all these different things that are the same thing. But I was just looking at that in lavender and the connection with lavender and Mercury and being that is the most mercurial, kind of mysterious thing. I think that's one of those etymological, kind of mythological, classical, philosophical things that will be able to forever be picked at. It's not oh, well, that just is that. Stoichae is one of those kind of mysteries of the classical inheritance.
Yeah.
But it's so ultimately
just so mercurial.
Yeah. It's just there's just so much there. But I want to see the two Greek words. I wasn't able to do it today, but I just figured even though I didn't, so it's not, you could still put them in a poem together, right?
Yeah.
They still have a relation, even if I'm not correct, but I wonder what they're really getting at with lavender might have so much significance if these are etymologically connected. You're lavender is a big deal because you're kind of oh, that's weird, lavender in a Hecate recipe. But then once I saw that, I was whoa, lavender has something going on.
Yeah. I think lavender today in the world seems fluffy or something.
Right.
But it's really not. It's this powerful, almost ancestral, for many different cultures, herb.
Yeah,
You know,
it definitely made me look at it in a different way.
Yeah, it's somewhat,
Yeah, it's like listed in like every like calm you down remedy, but you know
right.
it shouldn't take away from its power. You know, you just because you're just like, oh, it's lavender. It's just like a sweet kind of
But it's also
flower.
bitter.
What's that?
It's also bitter. Like if you drink,
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
infuse
Yeah, it's not
your
nice
lavender tea for so long, it's just like, ooh, it's too much. Or put too much in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it is.
So it's
sweet.
interesting if you never smelled it or never or never looked at it, and you were in complete Hecate darkness, and someone just kept handing you lavender tea. You'd be like, "This is the most bitter, nasty, motherfucker of a plant."
And, like, overpowering.
You know? Yeah.
I love drinking it with fennel. It's just very delicious.
Sounds so good. And also with Mercury being in Sagittarius, like it feels like there might be some anxiety there. It's just like it's just so like Mercury wants to know the details, wants to know how things are going to go. Like like it's also trickster, but I think it can be focused on like how are the trickster things going to happen.
Yeah, totally.
And just being able to like
I've definitely been focused on that.
Yeah. Letting the plan unfold instead of like being so obsessed with knowing like each step 20 steps beforehand.
Yeah, so lavender just being like, okay, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm excited for Jupiter to enter Sagittarius because the instant like Mercury went into Sagittarius, it was like I could look at it and be like, I totally know that's happening, but we can't do that. We have to do this right now. Like we can't do the big plan because there's this thing that just came up. It's like there was no way to avoid it, and I saw that happening with other people too. But so yeah, it's kind of I don't know. Anyway, that's just the Mercury and Sagittarius thing. But I like this. What we're getting to, it's like a bring back lavender is like a badass plant.
Yeah.
Can we go back because we skipped right over hyssop?
Oh yeah, we did.
Do you want to tell us some stuff about hyssop?
Oh, what a dear plant.
And so this is just back into like our main list of Jupiter herbs.
Yes, another Jupiter herb. Hyssopus officinalis is the one I'm talking about. It's not the one really found in the Bible. It's Eurasian though.
It's what they call Syrian hyssop, right?
Yeah.
Is in the Bible.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the botanical name for that one.
Yeah.
You do have it written down?
Yeah. It's the one in the Bible is I don't know if it's oreganum.
Oh yeah, oreganum.
Oreganum. Syriacum, which is a relative of marjoram or oregano. So it's in what they call like za'atar.
Oh yeah. I love that spice.
Yeah.
So yeah, hyssop is more
but so they think.
But it can people have been using it interchangeably for the biblical hyssop for so many centuries now that it's almost like interchangeable because of that.
Yeah, totally.
But hyssop is an amazing plant to grow in one's garden. Here in Maine, it overwinters wonderfully. It's this great perennial that's just so aromatic.
The bees love it.
The bees love it, those purple flowers. And it's great for, of course, colds and flu. It's probably one of the top ones I go through to when I'm coming down with an illness because it really helps my lungs. It's a really amazing lung herb.
Absolutely.
Which is also just like our expansion, our speaking. And it's also an amazing clearing herb. People have been using it you can also use the branches as an Asperger. And it's, what else? It's exceedingly antiviral. It's been used, is being called upon for HIV, Epstein-Barr, just all these viruses, like really tough viruses.
Yeah.
Hyssop really can kind of get in there and stop the proliferation.
I was putting it in sake and just for like a week and letting it, just because I love the flavor.
Yeah.
Because if you let it go too long, then it becomes more medicinal than pleasure. But that is delicious, just fresh hyssop and
Yeah.
sake for a while with the flowers, of course.
Yeah. I made a beer from hyssop, and it's not everyone's beer at
Yeah.
all. It's like extreme sour.
Oh,
Delicious.
really?
Yeah, I really like it, but some people are like,
Not because of the hyssop, though?
the hyssop makes it really sour.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Oh, wow.
Just let it go for a
Yeah, exactly.
It's,
delicious.
yeah, that's interesting. Like because of like the associations between the hyssop of, with vinegar and like sour and like biblical hyssop and whatever. And then, just that it got the name hyssop. I haven't done enough research into it to be like, well, why is the hyssop that we know, like that the European hyssop or whatever, gaining the name hyssop?
The anise hyssop,
Yeah, yeah. Like,
the Augustaceae.
yeah. Is that's the hyssop, the Hyssopus officinalis?
This one's different than the anise hyssop. This is not like our licoricey tasting.
yeah.
This
Right.
is more like camphor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean with like biblical hyssop.
Oh, yeah,
and-
the Syrian.
Yeah, the Syrian hyssop. Like, just like how did like they decide like, oh, this hyssop gets like, that name,
Right.
just that they must have really been
think
looking at it a certain way to be like, oh, this is really important. Because like the hyssop they're talking about in the Bible is like mentioned 10 times in the Old Testament and 2 times in the New Testament. And it was like for Passover ceremony, it was like what they say, like they took a big branch of it and that's what they attached the sponge on to take the blood of the lamb and like and
Oh yeah, right on
like,
the
right on
for
the
Passover.
door.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like one of
That's
the ways they
amazing.
know that it can't be the same hyssop because it doesn't grow in these like kind of stiff like
Right.
paintbrush style like and then
Also, though, if something's like not dying back,
yeah
it's going to get to different sizes. If you look at like a rosemary plant here versus a rosemary plant in San Francisco, it's like
right
you
yeah
can
yeah
write with that branch. You know?
yeah but it was just like
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
looking at the area like looking at the Near East and being like well what was
Yeah.
growing there like the word for it in Hebrew is ezov is what they were using and there's another they say it should be a purgative and it used with cedar wood and it should grow on a wall, but later they took that word wall and they looked at it, and that the word I thought I had it here, but the word they're using for wall,
Like
can-
a ledge.
oh yeah, it's like kier,
Yeah.
can also mean a ledge.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
and that was
Right.
like Solomon speaking, I believe, and so he's talking about getting it from, from the cliff walls, and so that made them think it was caper.
Oh, okay.
But caper doesn't fit into the other stuff, but that Syrian hyssop like kind of hits everyone, and they were like, oh well, it's not a wall growing plant. And then once they figured out they meant more like a cliff wall or a ledge, they were like, oh yeah, it grows all over the fucking like cliffs. And so they're pretty sure that it's that that zatar,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's insane. It's like that Jupitarian nature of it's like it is beyond the bounds of like it's not even one herb, it's starting to
Right,
encompass
totally.
multiple herbs like
Yeah.
the hyssop is just expanding beyond like herbal definition but then again like we're saying with nutmeg and with dandelion you see there's a bit of like kind of like a trickstery kind of not playing by the rules Zeus kind of thing going on and you're like oh, well, it's a huge herb in the Bible, and the hyssop we know today is not that same herb. It's like that kind of like, wait a minute, Dad, what's going on? So I don't know. I've just been having fun thinking about that. Like as Jupiter enters Sagittarius, my conception of Jupiter is even expanding. Into being like, oh, there's more to Jupiter than there seemed.
Well, I mean, experiencing is so much different than studying it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you'll have all kinds of revelations if you pay attention this time.
True.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
And that in Sagittarius is all about experience too.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting out there.
Yeah.
So, okay. So now we're mid-month now. The sun's moving into the final decan of Scorpio. And this is where you're talking about ground elder.
Yeah. So yeah, the sun heading into Scorpio. So ground elders often Scorpio and Saturn ruled. But But I don't know. It just really felt like, I don't know why. It just
made sense
came to
as
me.
far
The
as
sun.
yeah,
It makes sense,
it made
yeah.
sense what we were talking about like feasting to like you know it's like the
Absolutely.
for the merry monks.
Those merry monks,
Yeah.
for sure.
Totally, yeah. So ground elder, I mean, being a gardener and working in people's gardens, people can't stand ground elder. Goutweed is another name, bishop's weed, goatwort, because it's so voracious. It's an amazing grower. It'll just take over everywhere and in an area, and not many other things can grow as much. But I really like to look at these kind of plants because I think that these are often a really amazing medicines and amazing
Absolutely.
allies to look towards, especially, even the spirit kind of realm of the plant.
Especially, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
like something that's so prolific,
Yeah,
even like despite your efforts to eradicate it,
Yeah.
it just keeps on.
like I wouldn't
Growing.
put it necessarily in parts of my garden,
Right.
and often I won't dig up plants from someone's garden if I know there's tons of goutweed there.
Mm.
But I think it's great if
but
you
you-
have an
Yeah,
area.
you said
Well, just like spirits, you're like, yeah, you're great. You stay over there, though.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah, you
That's
definitely
your
could come in
area.
handy in the future.
Yeah. Let's exchange numbers,
Yeah.
but you know.
You know,
Yeah.
I'll text you.
Yeah, I'll text you. Yeah, I'll text you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't even have my number. I'll
Yeah.
just text you.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I think, it's really good to look at these plants for medicine and working with, because they are everywhere. And I think that it's good. I mean, it's also, if we are physically using these plants, then we're not harvesting too much of something because there's
Yeah.
plenty.
Yeah,
More
that's
than
really
enough.
A really beautiful point.
Yeah. So this actually makes a great pot herb in the spring, and it also can be put in salads. You probably want to put a little sparingly. They say it has a bit of an anise flavor, and I've actually just eaten it just fresh from a garden. But I think it would be really nice chopped up in salads or anything, and it's really good of course, for gout.
Yeah, so while you're like pretty much setting yourself up to definitely have gout,
Yeah, drinking
Exactly.
yeah,
to excess in Jupiter.
like make sure that you're
You're also-
Celebrating Jupiter.
yeah.
You also have your goutweed tea in
Yeah.
the morning,
Yeah.
so that uric acid is leaving your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, I thought I had gout last year at the because we stopped drinking beer and just like lost our taste for it and we're not drinking as much, so there's no booze and we were just like got into like really concentrating on the wines, and like when you drink red wine you like need to have some cheese, and
Yeah.
by the time like the Feast of Epiphany rolled around, like I was like absolutely sure that I had gout. Like I went to put on like a nice suit and like put my foot into like a dress shoe I hadn't worn for a while, and it was like, oh my god, like my toe is throbbing.
No.
But it wasn't. I ended up having like some sort of a athlete's foot, you know. But I was sure like at the feast of the
Cedar instead of
yeah.
goutweed.
of the Kangs, I was
Yeah,
like,
way better. Yeah.
So just don't even get that
Yeah.
far, you know, into the view. Like I know I don't have gout,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Try sandals first.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called ground elder because the leaves look a little bit like an elder leaf.
Oh, okay.
Also the flower, I mean, if you know elderflower very well,
Yeah.
you might think the goutweed flower looked a little bit like that. But I mean, it's low lying, of course, creeping across the ground.
I love your next suggestion for when Mars moves into Pisces, which is going to be really interesting considering Jupiter's in rulership and then Mars moves into a Jupiter-ruled sign. So by November 15th, Mars moves in, and then this is something that happens the whole month. Everything that seems to happen important astrologically, the moon ushers it in and experiences it like close hand, like makes a conjunction or an aspect. Like every time something happens, like the moon's just tracking it.
Yeah.
So like how we were talking about how like there's not a lot of like Earth aspects. Everything's moving out of Earth signs except for Saturn. and there's not a lot of like earth signs going on, so everything's going to be happening like intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally. But the moon being right there for all those changes and configurations and aspects is we're going to be kind of on a roller coaster, like that the moon's going to, every time you're like, oh, I had the best idea and it's really emotional, but anyway, so Mars moving into Pisces and the moon moving in at the same time on November 15th at 5:30 p.m. You're talking about seaweed, which I think is great.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like Mars and Pisces is that kind of flowing warrior. It just, I often talk about Tai Chi, but I mean, just that energy coming at you, and the Tai Chi master just moves and it keeps going. You're just understanding how to move in the realm.
Yes.
In order to like gain what you need, and you also have this exceedingly strong root.
Yeah.
Like almost like glue.
Yeah.
Like holding you, but then you're flowing with the ebbs and the flows of the ocean. But also you're almost like the trees of the ocean. You're just, it's this amazing, you're so nutrient rich.
No, it's so beautiful the way you wrote it. It's just
it's
like a ballet. And,
very
graceful.
Yeah.
But also like not to be mistaken as somehow like not strong. You're saying like the roots are really good, and it's like going with the tides, which are like which are directly controlled by the moon, and it's just, like, perfect.
And it's like an ocean plant, and like so it withstands insane amounts of pressure and force from the water. Yeah. I know you're saying that,
and
but
temperature.
And temperature, So this isn't like. So it makes so much sense that it's like, oh yeah, this plant can stand up to some shit that would completely annihilate you.
Which try to get some of that in you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, of course, like, and one of the doctors from the USDA in 1974 stated that of the 14 elements essential to the proper metabolic functions of the human body, 13 are known to be in kelp.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we could go on forever about seaweeds. It has so many vitamins and minerals in it. It's just an incredible ally.
I think it's good in general to, like, for people that can or live near the sea, like, to start incorporating the stuff from the sea into that herbal world, or into that world of, like, material magic or materia medica, like... that it's like we look at it as like different worlds, you know, which I mean that's classical too, right? Where it's like the sky, the sea, and the earth, but still like there's allies there, even though they're a bit more hidden or like harder to get, but yeah, it was making me think too. Like once you said seaweed, I was like, oh yeah, well. Like spiny urchins and even like sharp coral and like how much Mars you can find down there. Thinking about like Poseidon or like Neptune with his fork and that like the spininess of the sea,
I think they're really going to be some of the warriors for the sea as well, just for the health of the sea. Like a lot of there's quite a few local aquaculture farmers on the coast of Maine right now who are working with sugar kelp and mussels, and then the sugar kelp is like cleaning the ocean, then it also is giving a safe place for the mussels to grow really large and big, and then it also protecting them against predators.
Wow!
And I can just imagine us farming, like in Hawaii, a lot of native people of Hawaii would harvest seaweed. They have like gardens of seaweed, like many varieties. So it gives me a lot of hope to think about like people really getting into like growing these beautiful like kelp forests.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. Like as we figure out how to like, as our species gets
smarter,
or like it gets like sophisticated enough that we're making like the ecosystems that we interact with like better off than worse off. Not just like reducing our impact, but like making things like better than if we hadn't have come through the area, because of how fucked, we've made the sea, we're definitely going to have to turn that attention seaward, for, or else, it's going to be our demise.
Yeah.
So yeah, that warrior aspect is a good thing to point out, and hope maybe that's some of the realizations. At least, hopefully, someone will have that epiphany. Well, Mars is in Pisces, Jupiter is in Sagittarius.
Yeah, it seems like a kind of a compassionate warrior place to be
Yeah,
as well.
totally. Yeah, yeah. There's definitely a bit of like the pen being mightier than the sword there
Yeah.
too. That like, this poem that I wrote just kind of won the war.
Right. Like people are weeping on the ground, like
Yeah,
how
yeah.
beautiful it is.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
holding
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah, and that made me think of that like with Mars in Pisces, how like you say like I love this so much, you're like, oh, it slays me.
Yeah.
Like it like, oh, like it was beautiful, it killed me.
Yeah.
Dying.
Yeah, I'm dying.
I'm dying over here.
Yeah, you're killing me. Yeah. And then Venus, then of course, this is when Venus turns direct.
Yeah.
And so back to our Venus herbs en masse, right?
Yeah.
She's already flying.
Yeah.
So it's not like you need
Just
them
welcome
to.
her with
Yeah,
your-
yeah, exactly. And
honor
get
her.
on her wavelengths. Again. Yeah, it makes me think like how much she's going to be. It's like, oh, will she be overshadowed by Jupiter's rulership? And I think not. I think once it happens, people will be like, oh my God, everything's correcting itself. Like, it's going to feel like a big deal,
Yeah.
And like, I have stuff like on hold. Like, I started a Venus mead when in Venus in Pisces, and then I racked it or something when Venus was in Taurus, and then I was going to bottle it when Venus is in Libra, but I kept not getting a chance. So it was like, well, good, she's coming back to Libra, so I don't have to like wait.
Take care of that.
Yeah. But there's probably a lot of, it made me wonder because with like just the way stuff happens to line up with retrogrades, how many people have some like talismanic Venus project or some sort of Venus magic on hold, or waiting for, they're like, oh yeah, I was meaning to get around to that again,
Yeah, no, it's coming up. Get ready.
Because this time she's going to turn direct in rulership, where last time she turned direct, like in 2017, and when she turned direct in Aries, was in her highest degree of Well, she was retrograde in Aries, but she turned direct in her highest degree of exaltation in Pisces, but she happened to be square Saturn at the time. So, like exactly square pretty much. So we didn't get the same kind of like, because when a planet is direct, it's not moving at all. So it's like burning a hole through that part of the zodiac.
Right.
So when it's Venus, that's going to be like a hell of a lot of rulership Venus suddenly, So she's still in the shadow of retrograde, but you're going to get like this, like just blazing Venus,
Venus is so hot anyways. It's just like.
Yes. Yeah. It's so bright.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like we're not getting Saturn putting a damper on it this time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And so
Mercury goes retrograde.
And then what about the Jupiter Mars square is interesting because it's like Jupiter squaring Mars from Sagittarius to Pisces.
Oh yeah. Neptune and Pisces.
And then you're talking about dog rose.
Yeah. I just think that our constant culture, we have to do, go. Like, I think we have a hard time with Mercury in retrograde, but really it's kind of a nice time to stop, revisit, revise. But yeah, with the square, dog rose is often ruled by Mars and Jupiter. Of course, rose is Venus, but specifically dog rose, which is our wild briar with those tiny little rose hips that are around here are like really going off right now.
Mm.
I think I saw them at Chase's. I hadn't seen them with the very
Yes,
tiny...
exactly.
Yeah.
You'll see them on
it was
in the
new to me.
hedges. It's a real hedge plant.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, really beautiful. So really protecting thorns, entrancing flowers, and really comforting and nourishing hips. Just felt like kind of a nice honoring of that time of revisiting things. Might be a
like
little
how it
harder.
applies to like the Mercury retrograde at the same time. We get the square in the midst of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the square itself is like probably going to be like really motivating, you know. And so
Right.
it's cool that it kind of is like that thorn to like poke you in the ass, you know.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And it's dog, you know. It's like woof woof, you know,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
like it makes me think too about like the sea connection with Mars and Pisces too. Of like it's not the dog rose, but it reminded me of how Rosa rugosa like grows like all along the shore,
Right.
you know, and that like just I don't know, does dog rose grow that way ever? Do you see that like?
I'm sure it does. I can't think of a spot right now, but I mean I don't think as much of rugosa, but yeah. Around here
It made me think about
sure
that like just walking along the seashore too, and just like picking up things that are along the seashore and seeing that expansiveness of the water, and like while Mars is in Pisces, seeing that like the kind of energy and a like not aggression, but that like that power of the water. And just if anyone does live near the ocean, it'd be a good time to go and just kind of check it out, you know. And we've talked a lot about over past forecasts about at some point paying a lot of attention to herbs that are growing in that like ocean climate, like salt air, salt soil conditions, you know. So then we get that like grand water trine, which is hitting Rahu while nothing's really going on with Rahu, and hitting Chiron, which doesn't always do stuff, but just it was kind of worth observing that it was like, okay, we get that going on, like and it kind of puts some emphasis on like some stuff that might kind of like ping like the upcoming Cancer, because it's hitting the node while it's in Cancer, and you're like, oh yes, there's some sort of stirring here for sure,
right?
While because all the stuff is kind of migrating to the bends, you know, the 90 degrees from the nodes is where you get like the bends of like where it's not the south node and it's not the north node, it's that like halfway tension point. And so that's kind of why it's like that grand trine kind of like crossing across those bends and involving one of the nodes as well. So you get this kind of like this pull, this kind of like, if you imagine it was like it's funny because of Sagittarius and the archer, this kind of like something that just pulls the like string on the bow, you know, and just being like, and then that's later going to be something that's might slip into like the colloidal kind of like foreshadowing of the upcoming eclipse cycle. And so since we're kind of just like looking at things that are maybe under the surface, and kind of trying to get some clarity, you were talking about clary sage.
Salvia scleria. Native to Syria, Italy, southern France, and Switzerland. In some instances, people believe it has a link to the eyes and one's ability to see. And I find whenever I use it, it kind of brings me to another level, like can kind of bring you to other realms pretty easily. Also really good at self-confidence boosting, uplift of spirit, creativity and imagination. Also with the moon in exaltation in Taurus here, without Uranus affecting that. I think Chrissy maybe stated that won't happen again for another 7 years because of the Uranus going back into Taurus.
Yeah.
In March or something, I can't remember. But yeah, so this is a good time for accessing some kind of clarity, some kind of like visions.
Yes, absolutely.
And then also peach Venusian peach, Prunus persica, is really a wonderful, I feel like also kind of a transforming, often people, family in Appalachia, whenever someone has passed away in a family, all the family drinks peach tea.
Wow.
So it's kind of like bringing you to a different realm. Here I was kind of probably thinking about Chiron and just like the chances of feeling maybe some wounds coming up, or
Well, then after that, you go into like the sun moving into Sagittarius finally on November 22nd, and finally conjoining Jupiter, and then you start talking about like olive and bay laurel, and then I was feeling like totally behind this like olive oil peach bay laurel like
right
modality at that point, you know, like
yeah, totally.
It's like very classical, you know.
Yeah,
like,
it is very
just, like,
classical.
we got like some fruits, we got some like olives, we got olive oil, we got
oil.
Yeah, some pretty oil.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like
And also lemon balm is called it at this point too.
yeah.
For the Jupiter, sun and Jupiter ruling olive and bay. I mean, they're both amazing Mediterranean plants.
Yeah, and bay is bay laurel. It's in the same Orphic song of the Argonauts that it's name checked in there. That Stoichia as lavender is mentioned. It's like like it's a good source of. I'll show it to you later, but it's a good source of like all those stuff that might be growing. The Argonauts observed to be growing in Hecate's garden. In their Greek names, but laurel is just laurel. It just says like laurel trees,
right?
You know,
yeah.
And it's also mentioned in and multiple of her incense recipes, Hecate's incense recipes, and I know my grandmother always used it as it was like one of those like panacea, like but especially for upset stomachs was bay leaf water. You know, and now I use bay leaf water now as like a scrying water. You know, like
that makes sense.
It was like it's the only herb that your father will ever use.
Yeah,
if
right.
He has,
Wow.
if he makes himself bay tea,
yeah,
but like
nice.
won't eat like a scrap of spinach. It's amazing.
Right.
He knows it works.
He was inundated with it. But
also, just the smell of it is probably so nostalgic for him and for you.
I boil it just for like ancestor work. You know, you just like fill the house with the smell. But of course, like we're saying, it's very classical. And you know, as my grandmother was using it for upset stomach, it's another like feasting monk thing, like your bay leaf. But so laurel was another name for Daphne. You know, the mountain nymph was also like she was Daphne, like represented laurel, like in the whole story where the god Apollo falls in love with Daphne, who's a priestess of Gaia, and when he tries to seduce her. And she pled for help to Gaia. Gaia transported her to Crete, and in Daphne's place, Gaia left a laurel tree. And in other versions of it, she just straight up transforms directly into a laurel tree. But and then it's always bay laurels used like it's very fashionable wreath in ancient Greece. You know, as a symbol of high status. You know, like and for multiple reasons, but it might be like Apollo himself, like. Was smitten with a woman who was a laurel tree,
right?
You know, like resting on your laurels.
Oh yeah.
And it's exceedingly pain relieving. Like it's almost like up to like morphine level. You know, it's like amazing, and you can just like infuse it in oil.
Yeah.
And my teacher who lives in Italy for part of the year, she'll just over her wood stove. She says she just like. Gathers bay from her village, and then she puts it in, and then she infuses it in this oil, and she goes around to all her like 90-year-old friends and like puts it on their knees and on their feet, bathes their feet with it, and
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it has more oracular connotations later,
Yeah.
like with like the priestess of Apollo at known as Pythia reputedly chewed laurel leaves from a sacred tree growing inside the temple to induce enthusiasmos, like the trance, like being just really
Makes so much sense what you were just
enthusiastic.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then from which she uttered the oracular prophecies, which she was famous for. But the accounts would have her like shaking a laurel branch while she delivered the prophecies. And I know,
Yes.
yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah, she was very
in a
enthusiastic.
beautiful way. Yeah.
And I've heard also like the thing where it's like, oh yeah, the oracle wrote all of the prophecies on laurel leaves that were scattered by the wind, and you would have to go around and like grab them all, you know.
Wow.
But yeah, there. As we're talking about Jupiter and the hyssop, like it goes beyond the boundaries of even one herb.
Mm-hmm.
Like bay laurel just seems to do like it seems to be involved in like everything. You know? And,
totally.
But and it's that you know, like it was given as like people who won games and you know prizes and worn like it was like very fashionable and it was like oracular and it was like could heal your bellyache and it was like you know or like any ache, but it also like the oracular part of it is very much like that coherence, understanding and wisdom part of Jupiter, you know, to be like to understand the depth of something, the deep structure, like what it the overarching meaning or the subtext or something, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want some Jupiter in there if you're going to be divining something like grand or some visions.
Yeah, and so then Mercury, supporting Mercury on Friday, November 23rd, as the full moon shines in Gemini and Mercury returns to the first decan of Sagittarius. And then you're talking about Mace.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to have like this retrograde Mercury in detriment with the full moon ruled by Mercury, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And after all the like crazy this month seems like packed with revelation. It makes sense that by the end of it, you're thinking a million things at once and your head is spinning and you're not sure of anything anymore because everything's kind of changed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that beautiful, like I was talking about that arrow, that vessel holding, like it's almost like providing like a space for the visions to be or something that mace.
And to be communicated.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not listening, then you're not gonna.
Yeah, and like we said in the Grimoire Environment, Mace is like for Skirlin, who's like the operator, you know, of the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, like putting you in touch, you know. And so then there's like the Jupiter and Sun Cazimi on November 26th. And so more bay and olive.
Yeah, keep it up.
Yeah, so we start to get into like a definite like keep it up mode.
Yeah, totally.
And then
which is like this is like a good time for making soups, so you can just like keep that bay leaf in there. And, you know.
And rosemary too.
Absolutely, I mean rosemary's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean there's more illumination coming from rosemary. There's remembrance of things and knowing.
I love that aspect of rosemary is the remembering and it's lovely. Yeah,
because Jupiter Sun Cazimis are, you know, once every that cycle around, you know, like Jupiter's in a new sign, there's another Jupiter Sun Cazimi, and it's kind of like puts things into perspective, you know. It's like Jupiter's whole deal, like with his retrograde cycles are like really tidal, and so it's like one is like you're expanding, and then when he's retrograde you're kind of just like checking out everything you have and make sure you understand all the territory you have. And then the Cazimis are kind of like, okay, like it's like a reassessment of your philosophy, you know. Be like I understand what I have, I understand like where I'm going and where we need to grow. Like, does my philosophy fit that? You know, like in that kind of like Sun, like what you're doing. You know, it's like what you're doing and what you understand and how like. Are you living your philosophy? Like, and do you understand, like, that moment of understanding? So bringing that, like, the Jupiter herbs to the solar rosemary makes a lot of sense, you know?
Right. Exactly. And then I was thinking with the Mars and Pisces squaring Mercury, I always think that salt water and then maybe putting some seaweed in it, just like catching anything that maybe the square is bringing up, and then also maybe emptying it out, I think would be a really good idea. I mean, I didn't really write that it's probably good to let it catch and then let it go, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then really continuing on with more rosemary and clary sage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Then we get the only like thing that aspects an earth sign the whole month. That Mars sextiling Saturn at 4 p.m.
yeah.
And so that's an interesting thing that comes after like 2 Kazimis, right? You know,
Yeah.
we get like the Jupiter Kazimi, and then like which blows, you know, it like blasts off all the detritus and dross, you know? You're
Yeah.
like, oh, let's get out all this bullshit. Even though it's like we were optimistic about all this stuff, some of this stuff can still go. And then that Mercury inferior conjunction, Mercury's like, okay, here's my report. This is the new mission statement. I'm not done retrograding, so just make sure everything's correct because we can still make some changes. But this is the report of like, here's our new artist statement, and so all of this kind of like reporting to the sun is happening, and then right after that, Mars sextiles Saturn, you know, and Mars is like, all right. The whole thing is like what Mars and Saturn when they interact is like very industrial, you know, it's like that action and time action and like and put into a specific thing, like, you know, like machines like punching the same spot over and over. So it's like okay, now what are we really doing? Let's calibrate the machine, you know?
Yeah.
But it's this poetic Mars now. It's like calibrating the machine with intuition. But Capricorn and is a earth sign, so it's the really interesting, like it's like nature, it's, you know, it's like how you build pyramids, but it's like how the world naturally works, you know, like so there's an amount of finesse there, even though it can be very like stone upon stone, you know, and that's that like that you can't describe. You're like, well, how do you get it to work? You're like, oh, you just kind of like, if anyone's ever done any masonry with big stones, there you definitely finesse stuff in. You have to just kind of like, you're like, I don't know, we just are gonna float that stone on top of the other stone.
Yeah.
You know, like,
oh yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I was thinking about nettle being a great Martian herb, but really understands water. I mean, it likes to live by water. It understands how to help water flow through our body and clear things from our body, as well as Saturnine Solomon seal, which also, I mean, if you've harvested the rhizome before, I tried making an oil with it one year just by infusing, and for literally like a month or so, it just kept bubbling because that's so much water inside of those roots.
wow.
Just
In Solomon seal.
In Solomon seal, and Solomon seal also knows how to moisten like the in-between spaces in our body. It knows how to moisten our skeletal structures, our musculoskeletal system, and they both are just really warriors in different ways. Nettle is, I've always considered like one of the fierce warriors of the herbal world, of course, with its stings.
Yeah.
But also just, it's a real powerhouse of
You can't
vitamins
stop it.
and minerals.
But also just the way it grows.
And the way it grows, it just spreads.
Yeah.
And then Solomon seal also spreads in that way, but it also just, it's more of a quieter warrior. But it will dissolve things in your body that don't need to be there, like excess like calcium buildups of bones or bone spurs. It's kind of more that slower like warrior that just like Saturnine, you know, just like.
Yeah.
But that's amazing, like to think about, because rhizomes in general seem so Jupiterian just in their spreading nature, as you're saying. But then Jupiter and Saturn actually work in combination like surprisingly well, where, you know, Jupiter says yes and Saturn says no. So you're like, do they cancel each other out? Do they fight? You know, but really they just sort of are like, Saturn's like, here's all the restrictions, and Jupiter's like, I can work with that. And then it just grows with a lot of stability. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, their symbols are kind of like the opposites of
Yeah,
each other.
yeah,
Like turn them upside down,
totally.
and then you have Jupiter, and then you have Saturn.
Yeah, they're surprisingly imbalanced for being
Yeah.
on opposite ends of a polarity. They do well together.
Yeah.
And then Mercury conjoins Jupiter at 5 p.m. on what date's this? Is this still the?
It must be. Jeez.
A lot's happening on
Yeah.
at the end here.
The 26th?
Yeah, it's still the
Okay,
26th. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Busy day.
more mason nutmeg. Yeah, busy day. Yeah. This is like have all your stuff
Have your
on hand.
herbs
Yeah.
lined up.
Yeah. And that kind of takes us into
Monday. Yeah.
Yeah.
into the end here of November. Venus in Libra is entering the area of the nodes on the 28th and opposing Uranus in
It's actually
Aries.
the 27th that happens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And opposing Uranus and Aries on the 30th. So this already, I can tell, is like irritating. Like we just had Uranus just go back into Aries, and instantly you can feel that opposition with Venus. It feels really
Right.
different than how it's been. You know, that
Yeah.
kind of jolt. You know, and it's kind of back to something too. And sometimes that's like not as a big of a deal. As you're like, oh, whatever, you know, back to this territory with Venus or with Mars or something. But with Uranus, it's like backing the whole motorhome like back, and you're like, no way, come on. So it'll be good to be on the other side of all this Jupiterian kind of realization by the time we get back to this. And
Yeah.
you know, and then at this point we're still talking about all the same herbs about
Right. I mean, nutmeg is also in some instances associated with Uranus.
yeah.
So yeah, just keep on the nutmeg.
Yeah, I saw one thing about the nutmeg. It's apparently really popular in prisons, which is why nutmeg has been banned in many prison kitchens. And from the autobiography of Malcolm X, he wrote, "Stirred into a glass of cold water, a penny matchbox full of nutmeg had the kick of 3 or 4 reefers."
Nice.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
But
a great narcotic, and it's also great for insomnia
Yeah.
at that level.
Yeah, and it's like there's enough poisonous alkaloids in it that it can kill your pets. Like it's killed people.
Yeah.
People can overdose from nutmeg, which is more of that like Jupiter. Don't
Right.
be careful. Don't
Yeah.
overdo it. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
Got it.
but it would have to be a lot. Of
Yeah, it's pretty hard, and you're
Yeah.
just probably your body will just be like, oh, no more nutmeg.
Yeah, way before.
you get to
yeah. Unless you're like an infant.
Yeah. I just like a bit in my eggs, you know?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, little orange juice,
Yeah.
little nutmeg.
Yeah, I'm
No,
putting
it's
it on my
perfect.
soup.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Delicious.
I think that pretty much does it for
Yeah.
us. We don't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
In the
We've
spirit
kinda
of the
Jupitered
season.
out a
In the
little
spirit of
bit,
Jupiter,
but-
we
No, I
overdid
think
it.
we're kind of at average.
Yeah.
So
So.
thanks for joining us,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
we'll see you next month.